So it's amazing to speak to you guys all. Just to start off the introductions, if you can all just introduce yourselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Jamie Holman. I'm an artist. I work from a studio in Blackburn, and I'm currently associate artist for the British Textile Biennial. I've been in residence since the first biennial in 2019, and we're about to deliver a new programme of exhibitions and events in the centre of what was the cotton industry of this country throughout October.
John?
Hello, I'm John Tams. I'm a writer and inactivist. I am twice the age of everyone in this meeting, with an interest in folklore.
Well, we will be delving a little bit more into that. And yourself, Tez, please.
Hi, I'm Tez, also from Blackburn. I'm a stand-up comedian and sometimes actor and sometimes writer. I've worked with Esther previously to put on some gigs at the Booth Theatre in Rossendale. In theory, embarking on a national tour from next month, God willing. So
the format of the questions that I'm going to ask are basically based loosely around folk art and the connection that you all individually make to football. Just a little bit of background on my interest in folk art. So I'm Bangladeshi. I'm local to Blackburn, Haslingden. I don't live there anymore, but I grew up here. And my focus has always been to learn a little bit more about my heritage, how it ties into our communities that live here, the connection to abroad. So I think in my latter years, especially since I became a parent, I wanted to learn a little bit more about my heritage, what we've kept and retained as living as migrant communities here. And that's been my journey. So I think I'm going to pass it over to John, just because he's got a wealth of knowledge, just to say, what are your thoughts on the background that you've had and how it's tied over with folk art?
I was sitting in for a radio presenter at the BBC who was taking what BBC still calls leave. And someone rang in, it was a phone in, and they were a Derby County supporter. And Derby County at that time were known collectively around the region as Derby County Nil. That was the full title of the football club, as was known vernacularly. And I said, well, why do you go if they're playing so badly? And I stumped him. We were talking about something else prior to this. I said, is it for the pint on the way down at the Brunswick? Or is it the pie at half time? He said, no, it's neither of those. I said, well, what is it? So give me a minute. So I played a record and I came back to him. He says, I know what it is now, after the record had finished. I know what it is. Where else can I go and sing in a 25,000 strong choir? So he went for the singing, which thrilled me, because there's nothing quite like it. And now we're back in action as far as crowds are concerned. It's the most wonderful noise. It's thrilling. And it's a great thing to do, to stand on the terrace and sing and join in. And then topicality kicks in, and you've got like the Tottenham match the other day when they were singing, Are You Watching Harry Kane? To the tune of Bread of Heaven, which is like a newish thread, but they'd incorporated it into their new repertoire. Now they're back and full of song and voice, and it's a great noise.
So would you say it's more of a sense of community that ties into football?
I think it's totally a sense of unity, a sense of community, yes, and it's tribal, of course, which is no bad thing in certain circumstances, especially at a match. And to outsing the opposition is the 12th man, as quote unquote. So that's very important. But no, I think that singing together is something that elevates you. I was looking at some research. A guy called Terry Moran has just been revealed as the writer of the Greasy Chip Butty song, which is Sheffield United's song, The Blades. And he wrote it for Rotherham United, but Sheffield United stole it off him. And now they sing it, and he's a bit aggrieved about this. And but it's set to, the angelic tones of John Denver. You fill up my senses like a gallon of magnet. which is a local beer, or was. They've changed that now to like a gallon of maggots for some reason. And it's, I mean, it mentions Woodbines. I've got it here, actually. Like a packet of Woodbines, like a good pinch of snuff. Like a night out in Sheffield, like a greasy chip butty. Like Sheffield United, come fill me again. So it's quite lyrical in a way, and they've chosen to set it to, you know, this soft-spoken, soft-song country singer, John Denver. So that, but it's stolen from Rotherham United.
Interesting. So maybe I can tie that in with some of the work that Jamie's done, because I was looking into the background, and you've done a lot of work textile-wise, but that has been intertwined in terms of processions and just lots of outdoor in general public events. So how do you tie it in, Jamie, with, if we just keep on talking about the topic about singing and, you know, bringing the community together, how has that been in terms of impacting your work?
Well, it's had a huge impact on my work in the sense that the Industrial Revolution, which is, you know, the cotton mills of Lancashire and the factories of the Midlands and the shipyards of Scotland, are the birthplaces of football. In fact, you know, Blackburn and Darwin are, you know, is the birthplace of the modern game and one of the founders of the Football League. And it's the move from the rural to the industrial that I think makes this a folkloric tradition. So there's a lot of early poems by mill workers about football that were made by illiterate mill workers in cotton mills in Blackburn. So Blackburn Rovers were formed in 1875. The league was formed in 1888. And immediately, as soon as you have football, you have gatherings, you have mass gatherings. This new culture, these new folkloric cultures, as you know, as I think we all see them, starts with the Industrial Revolution. But of course, the Industrial Revolution also brings new communities to the areas, so you know, this tradition grows. And I, as an artist, I just find that an incredibly rich culture and history to investigate. And often it's not visible. You know, we have to remember that places like Blackburn and Rossendale and Haslingden and Burnley and, you know, East Lancashire in general is positioned nationally as a place of low engagement with art and culture. And, you know, my argument is always, well, actually, this is art and culture. You know, this is the good stuff. So hearing, you know, things like the Rotherham song, the Chip Butty song, this is a tradition now that is hundreds of years old and starts with the Industrial Revolution.
When I look at the community of football, I look at how it'll impact my son. He's 14. He's still deciding whether he wants to support his father's team, which is Arsenal, or he wants to support his team that he was brought into by his schoolmates, which is Manchester City. And I find it really interesting because, you know, in the age of modern technology, how is the folk art of football or the community of football, you know, the heritage of it, how is it going to impact the next generation? Are they still going to sense and feel and connect to it the same way as we did, or as we still do? Or are they slightly going to be a little bit more distant? Are they going to connect to it differently? So I'm going to throw that question a little bit to Tez.
For me, I came into football when the Premier League started. So almost I came into football when the game was going global and was reaching beyond local communities and was reaching people all over the world. And now we see, like, you know, teams like Manchester United, Liverpool, they've got such a huge global fan base. The amount of people that probably support that team from Liverpool or Manchester is minuscule compared to how many fans they have worldwide. It's incredible where it started from, those sort of Milltown rivalries that Jamie was talking about, to what is now just a global phenomenon. I mean, you'll probably get more heated debates now between Messi and Ronaldo fans than as much as you had at any point since football started. So it's amazing where football has gone. One sad aspect of it as well, I think, is like the next generation, because of the global appeal of the game and because they live their lives online, I think they'll be less inclined, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think they'll be less inclined to support their local teams, or the local teams might be secondary to their big multinational teams, such as Man United, Man City, Liverpool, Barcelona, PSG, etc. So I think the way it is changing is fascinating, but still that passion and the you know, if you watch the Italian football on telly or South American and stuff, like the passion that they have, it's a different kind of passion. Like they don't maybe sing as many songs as we do. It's more chanting, but then they're bringing out the fireworks, and you know, it's a different kind of thing. But it's still the passion that we have for the game is evident across the world. So I think that's fascinating to me.
To avoid this maybe distancing and just solely online, because I'll be honest, my son hasn't visited a football, you know, live match. It's all been on TV, and I want him to, and he's so tapped into this. Like, if you can watch a concert online or a virtual concert, there is a big disconnect. So because I'm always about what can we pass on to the next generation, what can we hand to them and say, look, you know, this is yours, treat it how you will. Where are you going to take it? How can we try and keep some of the deep-rooted aspects of football community and folk that goes with that, and connect it to the next generation? Because like Tez said, it might come to a point where it just evolves, and you know, it's two separate things. Where you watch it on TV, you don't feel it, and you just feel it at home, or you feel it on your device that you're watching, which would be really sad. And I don't think it's going to come to that anytime soon, but it'll be generation by generation that it changes. So Jamie, I'll ask you that first and then go back to John. How can we kind of narrow that divide from happening?
I've got two answers to it. The first one's really quick. I saw online this morning, Gary Aston, who's from Darwin, who does the Special range, and he's posted a picture this morning of a basketball player who plays for Houston, who plays for the Houston Rockets, courtside, wearing a new pair of Adidas Ewood, which obviously is named after the location of the club in Blackburn. And I just thought immediately, in a nutshell, that's, you know, the birthplace of this game is being memorialised in these shoes, which is really folkloric, you know, like costume is being memorialised in these shoes that kids in Milan and America and, you know, Moscow are wearing. There's shoes, the Adidas shoes named after people, places, locations in like East Lancashire and Blackburn. And I love that memorialisation, and it's part of the football folklore. So in essence, in some ways, it does continue, because I know that kids do wear that stuff. And even if they're not fully aware of the sort of tribalism or the folkloric aspects of it, which I know Gary is very aware, very clever guy, he's aware of it. But then the other side is that the game already evolves. You know, Tez talked about the formation of the Premier League and how, you know, now we're interacting digitally. I'm sort of hopeful about it. I mean, I'm absolutely really want kids to go to football, and I really want people to experience sitting in a crowd of thousands and singing or hearing that or watching a game. But I also think that the recent Euros are a really good example of how football is going to resonate with young people differently, because it's being played by young people. And I can't remember who said this, but I read it about class. Someone said recently, football's the last thing that hasn't been colonised by the upper middle classes, because they may sit in the boxes having prawn sandwiches watching the game, but you never hear someone shouting, "Pass me the ball, Tarquin," on the pitch. It's still, so when I'm watching someone like Marcus Rashford play football, this kid from Manchester, who is absolutely sort of like won the heart of the nation, despite, they get to a final, we know what happened, and kids are listening to Marcus Rashford. That for me is probably like the positive evolution of it. Where these kids take it in terms of using device, I mean, it will become folkloric. I mean, recently we did work on Acid House in these mills in Blackburn, and 30 years ago, people were despairing of those kids breaking back into, and now it's become heritage. 30 years on, we view it as a culture. So, I mean, the kids are all right. I trust them.
So going to you, John, I have a couple of questions. One that I'm going to kind of split and half pass to Tez and half to you. I grew up in a very traditional household, a traditional and very religious household. So there's two parts to my question. One was initially there was a slight divide of who watched football, and now there isn't that much in terms of male and female. It was always about the boys. It's not so much anymore, which is great. But then in terms of culturally and traditionally, because the men went out to watch the football live, the women were at home. And I think it's definitely evolved. But from a traditional aspect, what I found interesting, because there was a little video that circulated when the Euros went round, and I think it was a Islamic boys' schools that was based locally in Blackburn, correct me if I'm wrong, but they were all watching the football and they were all congregated around it. And I remember our families watching the football on TV and getting all excited about it. But then when you bring that feeling to the forefront, there is what Jamie mentioned, a divide. So we want to connect our heritage, which is obviously based here and where our roots are from, and we want to connect to football. But then there are some side effects where sometimes I want to be chanting my team's song, or I want to be part of this football community. And there are some that say, actually, you know, you might be a Blackburn fan and you can't watch our game down south, or you might, you know, you are not worthy of representing England generally, but you are worthy of representing playing for us. So it's a delicate subject, and I wanted to slightly touch on it, because it is part of our heritage, and our kids and the next generation will be dissecting this, and they'll make of it what they will. But as we are in the midst of these conversations, John, how do you feel about those disconnects? You know, it is going to be part of our history. It's always been part of our history, but how do we dissect it?
Since the pandemic and the return of the Terraces, everybody's been given even more voice in terms of when they're singing, just to celebrate the fact that they're together. But isn't it searching for an identity that is what your 14-year-old will journey through? It's a sense of belonging, therefore, so you can take ownership of the shirt almost, or the Adidas or whatever, and it connects you to that particular team that you're supporting. And there are divisions, obviously, in cities like Glasgow, for example, you know, Protestants and the Catholics, and then community divisions as well, in a softer way somewhat, probably, between the Derby, Nottingham Forest, for example, and Derby County are my two teams that are nearest to where I'm sitting now. And that's vital, and no one, if it's bragging rights on a Monday, everybody's striving for those, aren't they? So they're providing the divisions, if so they are, the separations are restricted to the pitch, or because it's not 90 minutes, is it, in terms of football? And we've seen with the 100, with the cricket, that's really gone through the roof at the moment. But with football, you've got 90 minutes. You can't really mess with the game too much, the form of it. But it's a day. It's when you wake up that morning, and when you make your way to the stadium, and how you make your way to the stadium, and what you wear, and how you behave, that is showing a sense of unity, a sense of belonging, a sense of ownership. And I think that's really available still, despite the super leagues and all that sort of thing that came and went, and thankfully so. It's much more grounded, I think, than we probably realise, and it has been generational too. So you can own a ship, but you can own a club spiritually, and that gives you a sense of belonging, a sense of unity, a sense of you've got a tribe. And I think that's healthy. I look forward mightily to the start of any season, but particularly this one. Now we've got the crowds back.
Do you think the pandemic has obviously affected communities and the economy in a large scale, and lots of small places, community hubs or maybe pubs have shut down? And I always think that the community places and the pubs local to football small grounds are kind of like the starting point. Like you said, they'll probably go there before they go to a match, or they'll probably go there and stay there and watch the match. And this is the whole sense of community. And the pandemic has affected this, and some of them have closed down. Do you see, because this is part of history, do you think there is going to be a change in the grassroots of how people feel about football, or look at it? Because if those starting points, like the community centres or the smaller groups, aren't there, will there suddenly be like a generation that will miss out on some of the early feelings of getting to know, I don't know, Sunday league clubs? understanding football if everybody's like just working because they've missed out on so much, and their local football teams closed down, or the under 16s football team is closed down because there's no one to run it because of the pandemic? Do you think that is a genuine concern that we should be looking at, and we should as a whole be investing more time into the youngsters so they can still connect on a smaller local scale to football?
My granddaughter is 4 and a bit, and she's already committed to Manchester United because that's where she lives. So how much of that seeding to get the grassroots growing will, to a certain extent, I think we're getting into the areas of politics where you know, the marginalisation of the North, to a certain extent, or from Margaret Thatcher land to up to where you are, has had a major impact in losing so many hubs and places to go. And if you're only 4, you can't go and have a Stella in the pub. You know, you've got to find somewhere to go, and we have been marginalised. The community, which is, there's a great word, and it's got common in it, which is fine, and it's got unity in it, and it's the same word. Community, I think, we really need to focus on bringing people together. I haven't been able to perform for nearly 2 years because there's no crowd, and I'm not entirely connected technologically to the rest of the world by doing a Zoom concert. So I'm eager to get back, like the crowds are eager to get back on the terraces. But I will take my granddaughter with me.
I'm just gonna pass over to Tez before we go away from that the original question. Do you think that maybe because of the pandemic, just focusing on Blackburn, how we approach football will be different? Do you think that it's going to be, I don't know, harder to connect for the generation? Because all I think is there's a group of teenage years that have probably not socialized properly for 2 years. So I'm going to pass that one over to Tez. What do you think? Is it just going to be a little blip? Is it just going to be another part of our history, or is it things will go back to normal and eventually it'll iron itself out?
I think it'll be a blip. I think that humans are very good at adapting to our situation, and lots of us had to adapt over the last 18 months, and then hopefully we'll readapt and remember how it was before that. I do worry slightly about this next generation, because speaking as, you know, from an Asian perspective and the Asian community, the British Asian community, we've still not had that breakthrough player. There have been players playing in slightly lower divisions, but we've not had that breakthrough star in football in the same way we've had in cricket and in boxing and other areas in both sport and academia. That's part of me worries that we're further away from it than possibly we've ever been, because I look at my own family and my own community, and the kids are just, you know, head buried in their tablets and the TV and their consoles, and, you know, they love football. The passion for football is probably the same as I had, but they go out to play significantly less than I did. And so I hope there is I hope there are, maybe outside of what I can see, my own scope, I hope there are some British Asian communities where kids are going out and they are getting involved in the lower leagues, and they're playing in sort of the under 8s and the under 10s and the under 12s and under 14s and under 16 leagues and stuff, and they make their way up to those academies, for those professional football academies. But I just fear that we're slightly further away from it than we've ever been.
There was a point when I was in high school that, you know, people started wearing more football, you know, buying football tops, associating themselves with their teams. And yes, I never saw anybody with a Blackburn Rovers top. I think I might have seen them in the shops, but I never saw anybody wear one. And that is now become more prominent. So tying it back to clothing, textiles, and, you know, the association, I think what might have happened, because football has, you know, the big clubs have had the services and the facilities to say, here, you can be associated with us. Here's our branding. You know, it is branding. It's like occultism branding. You can wear our top. And it's kind of like do you want to be visibly associated with that team? So I remember at points where you'd have your local team and you'd have your national team or your home team and your away team. And I was like, is that a thing? Do you support two people at one time? And then they'd have two tops. And now it's literally, they've gone from associating it with local community and your team. It's become like a celebrity thing. So I want the top. I don't care which team he's playing for. I want the top that person wears. So tying that in, how does that affect how the sense of history is directed? Because if you literally jump from supporting football locally to supporting football nationally, and not even that, I want to wear a top by somebody who plays for the Spanish football team because I like that celebrity. How do you think it's going to affect things?
Yeah, I mean, well, Messi moved to PSG and they've just raised €100 million in shirt sales in a week. And even I, at my big age, I'm looking at Nike.com for when their PSG Messi shirts drop so I can get one. I don't support PSG, but the cult of Messi looms large.
So do you think it's driven more, the other aspect is driven by individuals as opposed to teams now?
I think Messi and Ronaldo have had a massive, they've shifted the way young fans look at football. It's almost like the American thing, because Americans, they follow their sports teams differently. I know, like, there's teams like the Boston Red Sox, and the Boston teams have a large following of local Irish people and stuff. But largely, Americans follow stars. So when LeBron James moves from Cleveland to LA, he'll take 90% of that fan base with him to LA. Even though they're not physically moving, but as in mentally, they are moving with him to LA. And I think Messi and Ronaldo are the two players that have that effect in world football.
What do you think about that, Jamie?
When we look at if we talk about things in a folkloric context, and I think about the tradition evolving and it being like an industrial tradition, right? It evolves and it's a move from the rural. And I think there's a danger to be too nostalgic about things. History is important when we think about things folkloric, and tradition is important, but nostalgia is something else. And, I love John talking about, that song that is set to a John Denver tune. It's about the participation and it's about that's the tradition, right? The singing and the gathering. And even when we talk about hubs, I'm sort of inclined to be excited about the idea that kids are doing what we're doing right now, that this is a hub, that there are spaces where people are getting together and sharing this stuff and sharing songs and clothes and shirts and, the sort of oral histories, all these things that we can talk about in an almost academic folkloric way. Well, kids are still doing it, I think. I do think that. And I think that when they move in that sort of American context, that it just continues in different ways. And I just genuinely think that there'll be a time when that becomes normalized and we look back on it like this digital period we're in will become nostalgic. And there'll be somebody saying, but it was great when you could get together in a WhatsApp chat and share. So those were the days. Do you know what I mean? I think the danger is, we shouldn't, folklore in general, or folk art, is his own worst enemy when it's nostalgic, when it excludes people. When actually the history of this stuff is inclusive. When you talk about people coming to like places like Blackburn, we know why people came to Blackburn. Forever, they came to work in the industry here, whether they came from Ireland, which is where my grandparents came from, that's where I'm here, or whether they came from South Asia, or whether they're coming from Eastern Europe, or all of these communities mixing up together in these spaces, taking up the mantle, and it has to be inclusive. And it's not, for me, defined by physical spaces. Actually, we should lighten up about it and accept it. So my brother I was a ball boy at Rovers. It was a Rovers like family. My brother's kids support Man City. It breaks his heart. But we used to have we had a first division team. We had, the local team where you support Rangers or Celtic. My other brother supported like Northern Ireland in not England. Like this stuff has gone on forever. These little anomalies, and you find your tribe. And I think that I think we can't see what people are doing sometimes, and we assume it's not happening. Where I would prefer to see the grounds full, but it's not the way it is.
When we reflect back, then we can assess what's happened. While it's happening, we can't assess it. So that's one of the points. The other point is, and this is more for people whose family came to work in the cotton mills in the north, in Rossendale and outside. So I think it's I just find it mind-blowing when I think my grandparents and my dad came to work in the mills, and then they came from Bangladesh, which was a cotton hub, and it was actually, there's a lot of history behind that because they were the pioneers of cotton, and then they weren't because it was stripped away from them, and then they came here to use their skill set. And the irony is now people back there were Manchester United tops. And basically the start of it was they left that country to come here, make their lives better, work in the cotton mills, which eventually then turned into manufacturing and commercialized, and they've moved back to Bangladesh. Well, they haven't moved back. That community doesn't realize the connection. They just see it as like a large, I'm supporting this football, or I like this team. So that's one interesting connection. And the other one was, I want to touch on something that Tez said, is we never chanted any football songs, and I've never chanted a football song to this day, and maybe 3 lines, and that was it. And I think it's partly to do with my upbringing, because we were only I sang some hymns at my local Church of England school, but my parents didn't know. If they did, they probably hit the roof. And
I loved the hymns at school.
I loved them.
We used to belt them
great.
out. We used to belt them out.
But then I didn't realize that my mum would be like, so haram means forbidden. It's really forbidden. So mum would be like, have you been singing haram songs again? I'm like, no, mum, we were just, A, B, C, D, and anything that rhymed with it. But looking back on it, I just find it really interesting that obviously there's a norm now. And if my son picks up a song, he'll just, he'll just pick it up. And I think maybe it would have been so different if some of our community just like backed off a bit and let us sing our songs and then connect to football a little bit more. And I just find it interesting to see where the trajectory of that would have gone if our communities, and it's meant to happen the way it's happening anyway, but if our communities had a deeper connection with the singing on a chanting level at the football stadiums. So I'm going to drop that one to you, John. What do you think? It was just a thought.
No, I agree. I mean, it was always abide with me, wasn't it, at the FA Cup? You see, I like the FA Cup. I like the FA Cup because it's not as over-commercialised as some of the other cups, and and anybody can play, right from grassroots virtually, or have a go. And I think that community singing, it used to be the book called Community Hymn Books, which there for bringing people together and singing songs like "Abide with Me," which is a terrific song, and I'm sure it's very central to the post-industrial communities. What I'm struggling with at the moment, because I'm very old, is this normal that's gone missing. The new normal, the old normal was rubbish. So why do we want that back? Well, it wasn't entirely rubbish, but it wasn't great. I think we should have a new and throw another 6 and start again and just look after one another. I set up a political party. It was supposed to be a political party some years ago, and it just said, look after one another on the T-shirts. And that's all we have to do. But if football helps you do that, and if the sense of belonging helps you do that, and the sense of the unity of singing together lifts your heart and thrills your soul, then let's start a new. Because I think the old normal was not great. But I love singing, and I love to hear people singing. And I love to share a song or make a song. I don't write songs, I make them. The songwriters are like John Denver. They write songs. I use bits from everywhere and just bolt them all together and try and make a song out of them. That are drawn from the community, that are drawn from the vernacular, that are drawn from local accent. and dialect, which is a beautiful noise, you know, and it's so rich now. It gets richer and richer by degrees. So I think, you know, children today, as you rightly say, you know, they've probably got their head buried in a phone or a tablet. Mm. And I don't, I said I don't have a, this is my, you see, it says Sally there. I don't have a computer. I've only just got a phone, but it's only one that makes calls. It doesn't do anything else. So I want to talk to people and sing to people and be with people. I don't want to, you know, kind of be deserted by technology or marginalized by technology.
If we were to make up a little song or a chant that can be used nationally to bring in the next generation, and it doesn't have to be physically associated with any one team, what words would we use to put into the song? And secondly, then this one's to Jamie and Tez. And if we were to make, you know, and going back to roots and textiles, if we were to make a T-shirt that represented the pride of football for England, or something that I could wear, anybody could wear, just to say, you know, this, we're grassroots. What would you put on a T-shirt? What colors would you use? What symbols would you use?
The singing, I don't know. I'll defer to my more qualified colleagues on the singing. But in terms of a football top, blue and white halves, a red rose in the corner, Essex on this side, and then Shearer number 9 on the back. I think that would be, I think that would unite all of us quite nicely, I think.
What about you, Jamie?
I'm going to wear Tez's shirt, and I'm going to make sure that it's available in all sizes. I remember a really funny story about Rovers shirts a few years ago when they were sponsored by Kappa.
Oh, the Tam Computers one. The really fitted one.
It really fits.
I love that shirt.
Yeah, it's a beautiful shirt. Great, you know, Kappa. You know, another textile history. Like in the 80s, kids around in this country wore Kappa. They used to nick Kappa and bring it back from Italy. And then the shirt gets sponsored by Kappa. So these beautiful fitted shirts come from Italy and they don't fit anybody. They have to start making sizes they've never made before.
Yeah,
so
I was 20, so they fitted me quite nicely back then. But but yeah, if I was to wear one now, maybe not as much.
Yeah, and I think if I was involved in any of the chanting, I'd use John's slogan, which was "Look after each other." I'd like to see that in there. To be honest.
Yeah, that's nice.
What about you, John? For the design, what would you wear with pride?
Where I live is part of the Derwent Valley, which is a World Heritage Site for, and you'll all understand this, for cotton. A bloke called Richard Arkwright set up a mill there, and another bloke down the river near me here called Jedediah Strutt joined forces, and they connected. The river goes all the way down to Derby, where Thomas Lom had a silk mill 150 years before Arkwright and Strutt. So there was a manufactory. So I'm just working on a project for a community play, which will be in October next year. So I've been writing something that can do processional work, which is almost like a terrace song. And because of my connection to cotton, like yours, it goes, wine, wine, wine the bobbin, wine, wine, wine the bobbin, pull, pull. Wine, wine, wine. Now I can take that down the road and I can get one local brass band to play it because it's dead simple. But the verses, and this will depend upon accent again, but this is in my local accent. Pull, pull, clap, clap, clap. Tie the ends up, tie 'em straight. Tie 'em tight and tie 'em right. Keep them bobbins spinning true all day long and all night through. Wind, wind, wind the bobbin, wind, wind, wind the bobbin, pull, pull, clap, clap, clap. Now, that's work in progress, but how that becomes a magnet to be taken to the local football clubs called the Nailers, Belper Town, because it was a nail making community. They made iron nails and they spun cotton down the road. So if it gets picked up and taken to the terrace, I'll think my life's work is at an end. I've managed to get something stung on the terraces.
I hope it will. I really do.
Donna, I've got to tell you something. Oh. That little bit, wind the bobbin up, pull, pull, clap, clap, clap. I used to sing that to my daughter because my grandma used to sing that to me. Yeah, just that little bit. So that's
what I said about being a songmaker. I nick stuff that's been lost or marginalized or put on the shelf. But then you won't have heard the verse, so it needed a verse in order to buy time to get to the chorus. So, and it's very simple. So tie the ends up is very much a cotton, as you well know, a cotton phrase. Tie them straight, tie them tight, and tie them right. It will be straight and right. Keep them bobbins spinning through all day long and all neat through. Wind, 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 the bob, and so on. So you can kind of, I suppose, reinvent a tradition and add a bit of something to it. You know, we'll have to see. I'm only contributing some songs to this thing. I'm not writing it, and I'll be around it as much as I can. But I have insisted that we do a parade, procession. I love processions and parades. I love them, and they're free, and you can actually gather people up as you parade, as you promenade through a community, and the kids can join in, and they can bring their own instruments and drums and all sorts of things. So there'll be at least three different bands. There'll be a local brass band. There's a good stock of Asian musicians around here. That'll be another band, and there'll be just maybe a Caribbean band. I don't know yet, but there'll be at least three bands to join all the dots up with groups of people all singing this song if I can get it, if they buy it.
Sounds amazing. Sounds really like.
Come to Balckburn and have a sing.
Definitely. I just had a random thought, and it's based on some work that I did quite a while ago. And it connects back to what Tez said, and what I was looking at is that our nursery rhymes are dying out. So our traditional nursery rhymes, what we would sing in our mother tongue, are being replaced by Wind the Bobbin Up and Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So interesting thought is we won't chant, or I haven't chanted any football songs, but I obviously know all the nursery rhymes. So if something like this kind of morphed into a little nursery rhyme, football related, and try to manipulate the masses while they're quite young, let's create a nursery rhyme, football orientated, that we can start singing to all in all the little nurseries. So by the time they grow old, they won't have realized that they're actually been singing football songs. And just finally, is there anything else, and any last thoughts on folk art, football? Just last thoughts. I'm going to go to Tez, and then I'll go to
I think that excuse me, Tez,
Sorry,
you'll never walk alone is shared around more than one club now. A lot of them have adopted it in the same, like Abide With Me again. It's almost become another thing. But when it's sung the first time, they sing it really well. But then, because you were talking about chants, and there's a difference between a chant and a song. Some would say a chant is for those who don't want to sing or just want to shout. But when they get to the reprise of You'll Never Walk Alone, they chant it rather than sing it. And they drop bars. When they get to walk on, exactly, they go walk on, walk on. It becomes more staccato, and almost, if there are any lettered musicians amongst them, it would take a real, clever musicologists to actually find out why they want to take that bar out of it, and it would be something like 9/16 time or something like that, which would be nonsense. But they do it. They do it unknowingly in order to stop it being too, I think, romantic. And then it turns into something a bit more aggressive, a bit more warrior-like, and stamps their authority of ownership on it by stopping it being a lyrical song and putting it into a chant.
Mm.
I'm fascinated by how the oral tradition moves things about and how it reinvents itself. And it will continue so to do. It's been doing it since before the Industrial Revolution and the Agricultural Revolution and all revolutions, you know. And singing together it can actually break down walls, I believe. I believe you can win by singing together. I just wish, you know, we'd all sing
a little bit more
peace around the place, especially in.
So no, John, your comments have reaffirmed the notion that yes, we should create something that we can sing in the nursery, in the little nursery.
Are we going to write that then?
I don't know. What do you think, guys? Do you think we can put something together?
I'm in.
Tez, what would you sing? Because Tez doesn't seem very forthcoming in singing. But what would you sing at home if you had a little niece or nephew? What would you be happy to sing? So they become brainwashed and we control the narrative.
If there was something, you know, with the tune of nursery rhymes, then I would be happy to sing them. You know, I know the verse of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and stuff. So, you know, there was something.
There you go, John. Your starting point.
Well, I think you've got to have some numbers in. Counting's always a good thing.
Yeah.
And clapping's always a good thing. So you know, you don't have to be a singer. In fact, because I do auditions for singers when I'm working, those who think they can't very often.
Mm.
And those who think they can't.
I know I can't. But,
well, I know you can, because if you give you the right song, even if it's Twinkle Twinkle, you'll own it.
Yes, so guys, that's been really interesting. I just any last thoughts, Jamie?
Well, I'd say that it's important, this stuff, in the time we're living in now, and particularly when you are in places like we are in the north and other places of the country, after all these years of austerity and all of this difficult time we've been through. These are our cathedrals. These are our folkloric traditions. This stuff is important, and it is art, and it is culture, and it forms new cultures, and we need to not just preserve it, but we need to celebrate it. And that's why I'm not as worried about the big stuff. I like seeing all those kids watching England, and they'll find their way back. They used to find your way in at the bottom, I guess, and make your way through this stuff. But wherever people come into it now, they'll find their way into it. And, you know, these new traditions and the old traditions are really important. And that's in a place where there's not meant to be art and culture. Well, there is. It's just who decides what that is.
What about you, Tez?
I guess I have a slight worry about, because the game is so globalized and young people are more encouraged to follow stars and follow clubs and follow the money. I do have a worry for the smaller clubs and the grassroots leagues and all of that. Not so much the Sunday amateur leagues, but more like sort of the Division 1, Division 2, sort of League 1, League 2 sort of thing. You know, in the way that Bury doesn't exist anymore. And, you know, Bolton has some problems, and, you know, Blackburn Rovers aren't without their financial worries. It does make me fear slightly for the future of those lower league teams, because you need the entire football pyramid for the stars to shine at the top. Because otherwise, then it is just if only 20 teams existed, football would be very boring very quickly. But because the teams have their own leagues of 20 teams times 4, so you can play the national cups with each other as well. And then you've got the European leagues where the giants can go and play with themselves. I think the current setup is quite good, actually, but I do have a slight fear that the more the future generations of football put less money into the lower league teams, the more likely they are to die out. And so that's, especially when you start getting bigger clubs.
More money.
Yeah, more money, but also the power to negotiate their own terms and their own television rights and stuff. I think it will be very detrimental to lower league teams. So that's my slight worry. I mean, there's lots to get excited about. So, you know, you try and be hopeful, but I do have a slight worry for that.
I think one of the points that I want to add, so I grew up in the north, but I ended up living for my sins in London for a while. And north-south divide again, anybody with an accent is from the north, and anybody who's not that kind of accent is from the south. So how I used to tell them where I'm from, I wouldn't say Blackburn because I was from Haslingden, and Haslingden is next to Accrington. So I'd say Accrington Stanley, and then they would know it straight away. And I do wonder, like, how do they see the north? Like, do they think, oh, Blackburn's there, and so they only think the football team's there, and that's where you are? Or do they think, oh, okay, that's another team up north? I just used to wonder, like, you don't know nothing about football, and even if you did, you've only found out where I live and what kind of community I'm from, basically because I just said Accrington Stanley. So I just used to find that really amazing. So I am worried that if the smaller teams completely disappear, how would they know where I'm from? That's my worry.
Yeah.
And the last little point before I get to you, John, I think, and it's partly because I have watched Tez live, and it's also because of the work that I do. We try not to be political because we're trying to help our communities, and we're trying to preserve things, and we want the communities to still be connected and have a deeper sense of connection. So sometimes you try and preserve things so much, you end up becoming political because it's the only way to keep the communities right. And I don't mean political on a national level. I find out that a lot of, the austerity, the division of where the money goes and who decides stuff, I just find that slightly frustrating for me, because the communities that need the money, the communities and the art that we want to keep alive, it's all political at the end of the day. And I don't ever want to wear that political hat. But sometimes, in the same sense, I think we're losing the true sense of football because it's become so commercialized and / political because, and this is a sore topic, the COVID happened, football had to happen, but other events didn't happen. And it was largely a political aspect that let the finals happen. If the political powers that be didn't say that we can have this match and people could go watch it, what would have happened? So I just think they're now more than ever, the people at the grassroots, people like all of us, we have to try and preserve all these stories and how we feel. It basically is how we feel, what our relationship is to football. That is the story that would become, a bedtime story for some other kid 10 years down the line, when we as parents or grandparents or aunties or uncles will say, can you remember, do you know anything about football? Let me tell you a story. So we have a big sense of responsibility. So I agree with Jamie there. And you, John, any last words, any last thoughts?
Well, I think celebration and preservation are two different things. We should be careful not to preserve. We can't put folk art or anything we've been discussing in a glass box and then throw sugar at it. That doesn't work, because it's quite robust. It's quite a robust spirit, and it will endure. So we should celebrate the fact that it's muscular and it will live. We should really celebrate that. It's very important that it's actually active, and not put in a box. So no, I'd just leave you with what I say to my audience at the end of a concert, which is, in these straitened times, there's always somebody better off than yourself. And that's how I feel about the world at the moment.
No. So yes, no, thank you guys. Thank you all of you for your thoughts and insight. It's been really interesting for me. I can't wait to share this with my son. I just feel like there may need to be a follow-up conversation, but with younger blood, just to see what their outlook on our conversation is. That's it.
Thank you.
No problem.
Can I be the judge of that conversation?
Yeah, sure. I think you should referee a conversation, throw little youngsters, I say youngsters, but I mean teenagers, young adults, throw them in at the deep end and just say, what do you know about this? Have little stories, conversation, because I just always think the starting point of any inspiration idea is just conversation. You cannot talk enough with youngsters, and they can feed so much to you. I'm always mind boggled